Hey guys, how are you doing? Good morning. It's Monday morning over here, and I just woke up and saw all of the messages about our last video. No audio. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake from my part. It appears that either I muted my microphone when recording that video, or for some reason the channel was not working. So let me jump onto the stream here. Yeah, so here, I'll show you real quick. You can see it's recording, so I'm not really sure what happened. But we're gonna do the textures again, okay? So I apologize for the late response. I am in Mexico, so I know most of you guys or a lot of our audience is from India. Usually the video goes up at 1:30 a.m., so I'm usually sleeping at that time. And I didn't see the thing until it was too late. So the video is now down. We're gonna upload a new one. And we're gonna jump right into it. Now I'm gonna show you how the final result was, and I'm just gonna rebuild the whole thing. Of course, I'm not gonna just like talk over it. I'm gonna show you how to do it again, and it shouldn't be that much of a deal. So let me show you here. In the last video, we imported, very importantly, the object with the UDIM setup. And remember, the reason why we're using UDIMs is because UDIMs will allow us to save a little bit of connection things, or make connections a little bit easier and give us way more resolution. So we have 5 UDIM tiles for the whole metal thing. So if we click here on the metal guy and we go to F2, or F1, sorry, we have 5 UDIM tiles, which is going to give us a lot of resolution for this thing. You can see how close we can actually get to the object, and we're not going to get a pixelated image until we get like really close. And for the glass, we also have 2 UV tiles, which is also going to give us some very nice resolution, as you can see right here. So I'm going to erase everything. Let's just start from scratch. Let's start off the glass for now, and let's go to the metal area. And you can see it's actually a relatively simple setup. I don't think I did anything crazy. But of course, with no audio, it's almost impossible to know what happened, right? So let's just delete everything here. And we're start from scratch. So very important, on the texture set settings, it was very important that we did the bake properly. Now, one thing I did do on the last video, let me open Maya real quick. And I think, I don't remember if it was shown on the UVs or not, but I did duplicated the handle, the little hook here, and the valves in Maya. So I duplicated those, and then I smoothed them and changed the naming convention to low and high so that they had something to bake from. And the reason I did that is we had an issue here, and you probably can see it at the end of the UV video, where the valves were looking black. Same for the things here, and that sometimes happens when the object that you're baking from does not have any other object to bake from, right? So our substance does not find anything and just makes black, and then that black, of course, contaminates the texture, and we get a very weird result. So I'll show you that a little bit later. Let's start building up here, and as I mentioned in the last video, we have the metal texture. So I'm gonna look for a brass, which is a very like common material. And I think that the thing that we have here is made out of either brass or like a coat of gold. And the reason why I think of this is usually you wouldn't have like a lamp that's going to be burning with gold. It will be very expensive, and it's not like it doesn't work that way usually. So we're going to be using brass as our reference, as our initial point. And in the last video, I used this one. I used this. I'm going to press F2 here to go back to only 3D view. And in the last video, I think I used this H scratch metal. And the cool thing again about this is once you place an object here, it would automatically fill all of the layers that we usually have. Now, this one, I'm kind of regretting using this one because it's a little bit too obvious. Like the scratches, they don't look as organic as I would like. So I'm actually going to go here to the iron hammered, which I think is going to look a little bit better. So as you can see, we have this effect right here, which hammers the whole thing. Now, I want the scale to be a little bit smaller because I want the hammer effect to be broader. So I'm going to go here into the iron hammer, and on the scale, I'm actually going to bring the scale down to like a 0.4, I would say. There we go. And as you can see, this gives us a very nice effect. Now, it's a little bit too strong. Like, I don't want this hammered effect to be everywhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to the height layer here, and I'm going to lower the height amount, or in this case, I think it's the normal. So let's go to the normal, and I'm going to lower the normal amount. Just so that we see a little bit of that detail, but it's not like evident everywhere. We can use that one. We can also use like this iron raw, which I really like as well. I think this one looks a little bit better, so I'm gonna get rid of this one. And now one of the issues that we have here is the UVs. As you can see here on the where the UVs meet, we're getting this like seam lines. And the reason we're getting this seam lines is because this iron raw damage actually has some height information. If I were to turn the height information off, we would get only the texture, and the seams would be a little bit less and noticeable. However, they're still noticeable, as you can see right there. And I do like having the little height information here and there, because as you can see, it gives us this very nice like bumps throughout the surface. So what I'm going to do here is, again, show you one of the tricks that you can use to get rid of the seam lines. And that is going into the iron raw damage and changing the UV projection to triplanar projection. Now, what that will do is it will pretty much take a picture of your object from the front, side, and top view, and it will try to project the textures on those sides. So you will see that on some corners, textures will be like kind of like faded, like here. But overall, it's a very nice way to kind of like trick the thing into working properly. Now, I still think the height is a little bit too strong on this one, so I'm actually gonna turn it off. So I only have the texture in here, but you can see that it's a very, very nice texture, right? Like a lot of color variants. And of course, even though this says iron raw, we can go to the color section and just change this into like our brass color. So I'm gonna go for like this sort of brass color. Probably gonna make the roughness lower. I want this to be a little bit shinier, because we're gonna be adding some rust and stuff, and I do want certain areas to be shiny. I am gonna go here. Let's increase the value. There we go. Look at this beautiful thing. I think that's one of my catchphrases. I always say, "Look at this beautiful thing," and so there we go. And yeah, it's looking good. It's looking good. I like it. I like the amount of detail that we're getting, the amount of texture variation. So the color, I think, is a little bit too saturated. So I'm just gonna remove a little bit of the saturation here, make it slightly darker, and there we go. Now, metals, if you take a look at old metals, they are going to have something that's very common, which of course is rust. Rust is one of the most like common things that metals can have. However, inside of Substance Painter, rust can sometimes be very obvious. It's people just use like a dirt layer and that's it. And even though it does work, it might look a little bit weird. So as you can see, rust is not the general thing. It will accumulate, or it will go to the most common areas, or to areas where moisture and water will collect. So if you see like let's look for like a rusted, like this stairs. The stairs are great. So if you take a look at this stairs, you're gonna see that we're gonna have more rust on the crevices of the thing and less rust on the flat areas. Okay, so keep that in mind, because now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go here, and we're gonna create a rust layer. Now, brass, copper, and some of the other metals. I'm gonna give you a little bit of a technical thing here. So it's a tangent. You know I love tangents. So metals. The reason why we see metals in different colors, like the reason why gold looks like gold, like yellow, or copper looks like copper, like this sort of orangey tinge, is because what happens is they reflect only certain ranges of wavelengths from the light. So they absorb some wavelengths, and then you get back the yellow color, because they're keeping all of the other wavelengths to themselves pretty much. So usually like a white thing, it reflects everything, right? And a black absorbs everything. But in metals, they will absorb and retain different things. So copper, rust, and the rust from these metals that usually have a little bit of color tends to be either greenish or bluish. So if we go for like a brass rust, you're gonna see that it also goes into this like sort of like greenish bluish thing. Now, inside of Substance, in these smart materials, we actually have one that is it's this like bronze copper rust, which is very good. This bronze statue metal is also really good. So if you want to use it, go for it. Like, you can just grab the whole like material here. That's the lid here, And as you can see, we get this very nice effect. And the reason why I like this one is because we're actually getting a little bit of a height information, a little bit of grunginess here and there. So I'm gonna just right click, add a black mask, right click, add a generator, click, and we're gonna add the dirt generator, and we're gonna get this. Now, as we previously mentioned, we are not gonna have rust everywhere. We're gonna have rust more often than not on the lower sections of the thing, and less on the lower sections. Now you can see here that we're also getting this effect with the seam lines, very common. Unfortunately, here what you would need to do if you wanna fix it is you're gonna have to go to each specific element and try and fix it. Or here I think we can go to the dirt layer and change. No, we're gonna have to go to each specific layer and change that. However, with the mask that I'm about to add, I think we're gonna be able to break it up. So I'm gonna add a fill layer here, and I'm gonna change this fill layer, and I'm gonna add like a clouds layer. And what's happening here is we're pretty much telling Substance, hey, ignore this dirt layer for a while and just focus on having a very nice clouds layer. And the clouds layer, we can of course change the balance, which I'm gonna lower like this. We can increase the contrast to get like this like spotty effect. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to multiply this against the dirt layer. And what's going to happen, as you can see here, is now we're not going to have as much rust everywhere. We're still getting a little bit of rust on several different parts, but it's looking a little bit better. Now, I'm a little bit hesitant about this because of the seam lines, and we can try and fix those. Let me see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the layer that's doing the most like damage, which is I think this one right here, and I'm gonna change the projection to triplanar projection, and this one right here, triplanar projection. Let's do all triplanar projections, and let's see if that fixes what I'm expecting to see. Okay, we have a little bit of a. There we go. Let's just try planar here as well. And let's just try planar here. There we go. Look at that. So now, as you can see, by changing everything to triplanar projection, the rust is giving us a way better effect than what we had before. So I'm definitely going to change this to like an overlay or something. Probably like a multiply. No, linear dodge usually keeps it like, there we go. Linear dodge looks good. Although normal wasn't that bad. I'm just gonna probably reduce it a little bit. And then I'm gonna right click and add a paint layer. And here's where the most important part of texture comes into place. I always tell you guys this. You always want to tell a story, right? Like your textures should tell a story. That means that you might have a little bit more rust, for instance here. Let's change this to like their spots. Okay, I'm just gonna fade this out. So that means that there's gonna be a little bit more of humidity, let's call it gathering on this particular area. Maybe a little bit here, right? So those splashes that I'm adding here and there, those are gonna tell a story, because it's gonna let the audience know that something special is happening on those particular areas. Okay, so for instance, this like bump that it has, you might wanna like go right there. Now, if things are a little bit, I think they're a little bit too intense on the height side of things, so I'm gonna go here to the height as well. And remember, one of the cool things about Substance is everything is layered base, so you're gonna be able to lower, as you can see there, the intensity of the height layer and get a very cool result. I am gonna paint out areas where I wouldn't expect there to be as much rust. So things like this area right here, I think we're not expecting as much rust, and I'm just gonna get rid of it. Same thing here on the top of the head. Let's not have as much rust. Now let's add one layer of metal edgeware where things are gonna shine a little bit more, right? So I'm gonna go to the options here, and I'm actually gonna grab this brass pure. I'm gonna just say add black mask, right click, add a generator, and we're gonna do a metal edgeware on the generator. There we go. And as you can see, this is very invasive. It like hits everything very, very strongly. I am gonna keep this as linear dodge in the base color as well, because it multiplies the color. And I'm gonna soften this up so the wear contrast is gonna go low, and we're definitely gonna bring this lower. So as you can see now, that gives us a little bit of variation. Metals are tricky. Metals are one of those things that if you don't pay attention, you're gonna get a little bit confused about whether or not things are doing what you want them to do. So I recommend pressing the letter C to go into channel mode, and this will allow you to see how the channel is being affected by what you're doing. So on this one, I'm just gonna use a paint layer, a traditional paint layer. And with the black color, I'm gonna get rid of some of the metal edgeware, because we don't want things to be like super obviously affected by the metal edgeware everywhere. So we want to give it a little bit of a finish. We might add a little bit of metal edgeware here, for instance. See how we're painting that. And then if you press your letter M, you're gonna be able to jump back into what you had before. I think there's a little bit too much rust here, so let's reduce it a little bit. There we go. Same thing here. You can see that how the metal edgeware is affecting everything in a very like obvious way. And metal edgeware happens in places where the object is going to be hitting or colliding with other objects, right? So like this inner areas where it's protected by the copper sculpt, I wouldn't expect them to see it. I saw a comment from one of you guys. You told me that they're not like on the street. I know that they're not on the street. It's like one of those stereotypes, right? Like you think about, or sometimes in the media, wrongly, of course, but it's like with us Mexicans, they think we have donkeys everywhere and tacos and stuff. And well, tacos, yeah, that's true. We actually do have tacos everywhere, but not donkeys. We're not riding donkeys or using sombreros all the time. This month is an Independence Day in Mexico. The September 15 is our Independence Day. That's when everyone wears sombreros and parties pretty hard. So, but not not always. Some people wrongly think that Cinco de Mayo is our like Independence Day for some reason. But no, Cinco de Mayo, we don't even celebrate Cinco de Mayo. It's heavily celebrated in the United States, but we don't celebrate Cinco de Mayo. So as you can see here, I'm adding a little bit of this like shiny effect on the top of the heads of the snakes. And the reason why I'm doing this is if you've ever been to like a museum or like a public park where they have like bronze statues, people usually like touch them or rub them, and the areas where our hand oils like remain on the statue, they get shinier. So that's why you shouldn't do it though, because it damages the statues. So I am going to keep this one here, but I'm going to go back to the iron raw damage and make it a little bit rougher so that shiny area shines a little bit more. See how that looks very nice. And there we go. Now let's add one more layer of like ash and darkness to it. I want to add a little bit more like darkness to the whole thing. So I'm going to add a fill layer, like a basic fill layer here. The roughness is going to be relatively high, and the colors is going to be like a really dark red. Really dark red like this. I'm gonna add a black mask, and the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a generator, but I'm not gonna add the typical dirt generator. I'm actually gonna add this thing called the light generator. And the cool thing about the light generator is that it's pretty much like if a light was shining on the object, and you can decide how this light is shining on the object. So I'm gonna turn this around, as you can see here, so that the light is shining from the top or from the bottom all the way to the top. I'm going to change the highlight glossiness, of course, or lower it. Let's do the highlight level. There we go. See how we're getting these very nice shadows here on the underside of the whole thing. I don't want as much light attenuation because I want all the lower areas where smoke would hit the thing to be like contaminated by this. Look at this. Very nice. Now, of course, if I just leave it like this, it's going to look horrible. So what I need to do here is I need to use a blend mode similar to what we did with the clouds. So I'm going to add a generator, and let's add a dirt generator, or not dirt, let's not a generator, sorry. I actually need a fill layer. So right click, fill layer, and we're going to use something like has to be like grunge dirt or something, this one. There we go. So now, of course, on this grunge dirt, we're going to change the options to triplanar projection. And I'm going to play around with the scale so that we have this more of like a dusty effect. And I'm going to play with the balance. And we're going to multiply this against the other element and see how everything becomes like very dark, very nice. We can play with the contrast as well, which I'm going to keep low actually. And we're of course going to do this as an overlay. and probably bring this down. So it's just a little bit of like a dirt that I want to add everywhere. If I press M again to check the material, you're gonna see that this very nice layer here, not only is it darkening everything, it's actually removing a little bit of the gloss. Now I don't particularly want to get rid of the dust. So let me bring, like, that's roughly the color that I want, but I'm gonna go back to the material, and if I go into the roughness, let's bring the roughness back in. So I don't want to lose a little bit of the roughness, but not as much. And there we go. That's I think that's looking very, very nice here. We might even go to like the roughness channel and lower the roughness here. So there's again 2 ways in which you can control it. I'm actually gonna go here and give it some of the roughness back, because I don't want this thing to be shiny-ish. There we go. So that's looking good. I think we're in a good position here. Now I'm gonna add a couple more layers, and this one is the oil layer. I'm gonna add an oil layer, so I'm gonna do a fill layer. It's gonna be a very dark color here, and this is gonna definitely go into like the overlay option. And I'm gonna turn the metallic all the way up, and I'm actually gonna turn the roughness all the way down, so that we get this sort of like oily effect. Okay, definitely have to go a little bit darker here. And on the color, I'm gonna get rid of some of the color, so that we have this very shiny effect. Black mask again, and this one I'm actually gonna manually paint. So I'm imagining that this is the area where we would normally fill the whole thing. So I'm gonna use this dirt splash, and I'm gonna add a little bit of like splash here, just like kind of like making it seem like some of the oil sometimes drips around. You know, when you're like pouring some water or something, sometimes you just spill it out. I'm gonna do a little bit of dots here. Just like splashes. And I'm not only expecting a little bit of splashes here, you might have gotten like a splash over here at some point, and the oil is just like sitting there. It's a little bit of dirt spot there. So this is the cool thing. Now, of course, in here, I'll definitely expect to have a lot of oil. Some of the oil that does not burn. A little bit of splotches here and there. And we can delete some of it if it's a little bit too much. I don't think there's backface masking here inside of Substance. Should be a feature. We should ask for that feature. I think that would be a good one. Whoop. I would expect to see maybe a little bit of oil like splashing like up here, just a little bit. And again, the main reason why we want this sort of like variation is so that the material is not completely flat, right? Like we want things to look slightly interesting here and there. So just a little bit of a couple of little points again here and there that change the way it looks might be helpful for us. So there we go. Probably I'm gonna add a little bit of oil over here. And that's it. Now, I definitely want to add a little bit of like a base dirt layer down here. So I am going to go for a rust. I think a rust is going to be good. So I'm just going to go for like a traditional rust here. And if you go into the smart masks right here, there are some smart masks that are really good. One that I like is this ground dirt, which if you just drop, it automatically detects where things are. And you can change here on the balance, of course, of the mask. You can change how high this goes. So I'm probably just gonna have a little bit of dirt here, and I'm gonna change this to like an overlay so that it gets darker. I only want. I'm thinking about if I want rust or color information or not. I think color information is fine, but I'm just gonna change this to like a darker blue, like this, like a dark green. We can of course lower this intensity. I think I'm gonna get rid of the roughness. I don't want the roughness. I just want the metalness. So that way, see how nice the variation here is in color. It's gonna give us a very, very interesting look overall. And yeah, there we go. I think that's pretty much it. I think that's all I'm gonna do with the Cobra right here. We can go a little bit crazy. There's one more thing I'm gonna do. Just a scratch layer. So I'm gonna add a fill layer, completely metallic. And the very, very shiny here, or probably a little bit rougher like this. Black mask, and I'm gonna do a fill layer. And there's one called scratches. There's one texture here inside of Substance called scratches. It's this grunge scratches, which is very cool. Look at that. We just scratched the whole surface. I'm going to change this to linear dodge and just lower the intensity. And again, the idea of the scratches is just to add a little bit more of surface information on the thing and have a little bit of variance here and there. And that's it. So as you can see, we have a very, very fine and nice texture that, thanks to the UDIMs, we are going to have a great resolution. And now the only thing that we need to do is the glass. Now, for the glass, we're going to be using the substance layer shader. And that means that we're going to be calibrating the materials inside of Maya. We don't need to paint the materials here. What I'm going to paint here is a mask. I'm gonna use this as a template to paint my mask. And it's very simple. I'm going to carry the fill layer here, roughness all the way up, and this is going to be my white mask. Another fill layer, roughness all the way up, and color all the way down to black. And then on this one, I'm going to add a black mask, and I'm going to say add a fill layer, and there's a very cool texture here inside of Substance called Finger, Grunge Finger Dusty Spread, this one right here. And look at this. So it's as if someone had actually touched the lamp and left a mark there. The only thing it's inverted, so I'm going to invert it because we want the glass to be very very dirty, right? Like super dirty. So that means that most of the thing that we're going to be projecting here is going to be the dirt. So whatever looks black is what the dirt is going to be, and whatever looks white is what the glass is going to be. So here I am definitely going to change this to triplanar projection, and let's increase the scale a little bit. There we go. Something like, I think like a 3 is good enough. And look at that. Very nicely. So again, whatever you see as white, that's going to be the glass. That's what we're going to see as glass. And what you see as black is what we're going to see as the dust or the dirt. Since we do want to have some clear areas or clearer areas, I am going to change the contrast here to make like a very intense contrast on the element. And let's play around with this thing, because I do want to have some very like clean white areas, and the other areas are definitely going to be black. So something like this. Again, to make sure that there's enough white so that we can see the glass or through the glass and see the inner side. And that's it. That's pretty much it. You can, of course, play around, add more textures, add more layers, create more interesting effects. But this is pretty much it. So I'm just going to save this real quick. So, of course, it's going to save on top of my element. And the final thing I'm going to show you is how to export this texture. So I'm going to export here. I am going to go into the list of exports and make sure that, as you can see, everything is going to be exported with the snake lamp M glass base color 1001. We're going to be using the Arnold AI standard export. I'm going to export them in Targa files, and you can see I'm exporting them into our source images. So I'm just going to hit export and wait a little bit for everything to finish. And as you can see here, all of them are ready. So the only issue, and we've talked about this before about UDIMs, is look at the amount of textures that we have. It's almost 252 megabytes of information just for textures. Now, we're not going to be using all of them. However, if you can think about like doing a robot with 20 UDIMs, then you're going to have several gigabytes of texture information that you're going to have to use. In film, that's not really big a deal because everything's going to be rendered out in the render farm anyways. But if you were doing this for a game or for less cinematic and you're going to render it at home, then yeah, this is going to take a little while. So that's it for today, guys, or for this one. Sorry again for the no audio thing. I'm going to be more careful in the future to make sure that that does not repeat, or at least not as frequently. I know this is the first time, but I don't want this to happen again. So stay tuned. Tomorrow we're going to continue with this lamp. We're going to be doing the render setup, and we're going to try to get a very nice cinematic render. So hang on tight, and I'll see you back tomorrow. Bye-bye.